respected. There comes a moment when your tears stop being a weakness and become the evidence that you survived something that was supposed to destroy you. They played with your heart, tested your patience, made you question your worth, and thought you would always be there waiting. But sometimes the greatest punishment you can give someone is not revenge. It is becoming completely unavailable to the person who never appreciated your presence. There was a woman who loved a man with everything she had. She didn't love him halfway. She showed up when he was struggling. She listened when nobody else would. She forgave things that secretly broke pieces of her heart. And every time he pulled away, she blamed herself. She would stare at her phone late at night, wondering why his messages had become shorter, why his voice sounded different, why the man who once couldn't go a day without talking to her suddenly acted like speaking to her was a responsibility. And the hardest part wasn't that he changed. The hardest part was that she kept hoping the old version of him would come back. That's where many people lose themselves. They fall in love with who somebody used to be while ignoring who that person is becoming. He knew she cared. That's why he became careless. He knew she would forgive him. That's why he stopped being afraid of hurting her. He knew she would come back. That's why he never learned what it felt like to lose her. But one morning, something inside her finally changed. She didn't wake up angry. She didn't wake up wanting revenge. She simply woke up tired. Tired of explaining her worth. Tired of asking for basic respect. Tired of wondering whether she was enough for someone who had never made her feel secure. And that morning she made a decision that would quietly change everything. She stopped chasing, not to make him jealous, not to make him suffer, not because she suddenly stopped loving him. She stopped because she finally understood that love without respect becomes self-abandonment. And when she stopped chasing him, something unexpected happened. The silence became louder than all her arguments ever were. For the first time, he had to sit with the consequences of his own behavior. He couldn't blame her for leaving anymore. He couldn't say she didn't try. He couldn't pretend she hadn't given him chance after chance, because she had. She had given him more chances than he deserved. And now there was nothing left to prove. That's when people often realize the value of something they treated like it was replaceable. You see, sometimes a person doesn't understand your importance while you're constantly available. They understand it when your presence becomes a memory, when they reach for their phone and realize you're not waiting, when they have a bad day and realize the person who always listened isn't there anymore, when they finally meet other people and discover that not everybody loves with the same depth. That's when regret begins. But listen carefully. Your goal should never be to make someone suffer. Your goal should be to stop suffering for someone who chose not to protect your heart. There is a difference. Revenge keeps you emotionally connected to the person who hurt you. Healing sets you free. If he played games with your heart, don't become a player. If he lied, don't become a liar. If he ignored you, don't spend your life trying to get his attention. If he made you feel replaceable, don't waste another day trying to prove that you were valuable. Walk away, not loudly, not dramatically. Walk away with dignity. Because sometimes the most powerful goodbye is the one you never announce. You simply stop returning to the place that kept breaking you. And maybe tonight you're listening to this with tears in your eyes. Maybe you still love him. Maybe part of you is hoping he'll call. Maybe you're wondering whether he misses you. Maybe you're checking your phone every few minutes. But let me tell you something from the deepest place of your heart. You don't need to know whether he misses you. You need to know whether you miss yourself. Because somewhere between loving him and trying to keep him, you may have forgotten the person you were before all this pain. The person who laughed freely, the person who slept peacefully, the person who didn't need a notification to feel valuable, the person who didn't question every message, the person who didn't spend hours wondering, what did I do wrong? Go find that person again. That's the real comeback. Not making him jealous, not finding somebody new immediately, not posting pictures just so he sees them. Your comeback is waking up one morning and realizing that his silence doesn't control your mood anymore. His name doesn't control your heartbeat anymore. His absence doesn't determine your worth anymore. That's when you win. Because the person who once had control over your emotions suddenly becomes powerless over your peace. And here's the part nobody tells you. When you truly let go, sometimes they come back. Not because you manipulated them, not because you played a game better than they did, but because distance finally gives them the opportunity to experience what your presence was giving them for free. They begin remembering the little things, the way you cared, the way you listened, the way you believed in them, the way you stayed when leaving would have been easier, and suddenly the person who once acted like they didn't care starts wondering where you went. But by then, you may have changed, because healing changes your standards. You stop asking, how can I get him back? And you start asking, why would I go back to something that cost me my peace? That question can save your life. Because sometimes God removes people from your life not because you weren't good enough for them, but because they were becoming too comfortable with hurting someone who loved them. And maybe losing you will teach them something. Maybe it will teach them that hearts aren't toys. Maybe it will teach them that loyalty isn't weakness. Maybe it will teach them that good people don't stay forever when they're constantly mistreated. But whether they learn or not is no longer your responsibility. Your responsibility is you, your healing, your future, your peace, your heart. And if they ever look back and realize what they lost, let them look. You don't have to turn around, because the greatest chapter of your life may begin the exact moment you stop begging someone to remain in a chapter they were never worthy of. You loved them, you tried, you forgave, you stayed, and now it's time to choose yourself, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understood that caring about someone should never require abandoning yourself. And when you finally choose yourself, something beautiful happens. The tears become lessons, the loneliness becomes strength, the silence becomes peace. And the person who once made you feel like you weren't enough becomes nothing more than a chapter in the story of how you learned your worth. There is a kind of pain that doesn't come from losing someone. It comes from realizing that the person you loved was capable of losing you without even trying to stop you, and that realization can break something deep inside you, because you start replaying everything, every conversation, every promise, every moment when you ignored your instincts because you wanted to believe the best about them. You remember the nights you cried quietly because you didn't want anybody to know how badly you were hurting. You remember making excuses for their behavior. They're just stressed. They're going through something. Maybe they don't know how to express themselves. You kept finding reasons to forgive what your heart already knew was unacceptable. And that's what happens when you love someone deeply. You don't see their behavior clearly. You see their potential. You see who they could become. You see the person they were when they first made you feel special. But eventually, reality becomes louder than hope. And one day, you have to accept something painful. You cannot love somebody into becoming the person you need them to be. You cannot give more affection and make someone respect you. You cannot become more beautiful, more patient, more understanding, or more available and somehow convince someone to value you. The right person doesn't need to be convinced. The right person doesn't make you compete for basic attention. Now, the right person doesn't repeatedly hurt you and then expect your love to remain unchanged. And when you finally understand that, your heart begins to change. You stop begging. You stop explaining. You stop sending the long paragraphs. You stop asking, why are you doing this to me? Because you finally realize that sometimes the answer is painfully simple. They do it because they know you'll tolerate it. And once you stop tolerating it, the entire dynamic changes. Think about that. The moment you stop accepting crumbs, the person giving you crumbs suddenly has nothing to offer. The moment you stop chasing, the chase ends. The moment you stop reacting, the game loses its power. And that is where your strength begins. Not when they regret you, not when they call you, not when they send that "I miss you" message. Your strength begins when you no longer need any of those things. Maybe that's what they're not expecting. They expect you to come back. They expect the familiar message. They expect you to ask how they're doing. They expect you to forgive. They expect you to be waiting in the same place they left you. But you aren't there anymore. You're growing, you're healing, you're becoming someone they don't recognize. And sometimes the person who hurt you is shocked by your transformation because they only knew the version of you that tolerated their behavior. They don't know the version of you that has boundaries. They don't know the version of you that can walk away. They don't know the version of you that can love deeply without begging to be loved back. And that's powerful because there is something unforgettable about a person who finally discovers their own worth. They don't need to announce it. They don't need to prove it. You can see it in the way they carry themselves. You can hear it in the way they speak. You can feel it in the way they no longer chase people who keep running away. And maybe your ex will notice. Maybe they'll start asking mutual friends about you. Maybe they'll check your social media. Maybe they'll send a casual message pretending they just wanted to see how you're doing. Maybe they'll suddenly remember your birthday. Maybe they'll say, "I was thinking about you." And your heart might race because you're human. You might still have feelings. You might still remember the good moments. But don't confuse nostalgia with compatibility. Missing someone doesn't mean you should return to them. Loving someone doesn't mean they deserve access to you. And forgiveness doesn't mean reopening a door that nearly destroyed your peace. Sometimes forgiveness means saying, "I don't hate you anymore, but I cannot allow you to hurt me again." That's maturity. That's healing. That's strength. And if they truly regret what they did, they won't just say it. They'll show it. They'll take responsibility. They'll stop making excuses. They'll understand the pain they caused. They'll become consistent instead of emotional for 2 days and distant for 2 weeks. Because real regret produces change. Words are easy. Anybody can say, "I've changed." But transformation is visible, and you should never lower your standards just because somebody suddenly becomes afraid of losing you. Let them prove it. And even then, remember this, you don't owe anybody another chance simply because they finally realized your value. You gave them chances when they didn't appreciate them. You don't have to reward someone for learning a lesson at your expense. Sometimes the lesson is that access to you is earned. And this is where I want you to be honest with yourself. Were you really loved, or were you simply convenient? Were they committed to you? Or did they only become interested when they felt you slipping away? Because there is a huge difference. Someone who truly loves you doesn't need the threat of losing you to start treating you well. They don't wait until you're exhausted to suddenly become romantic. They don't destroy your confidence and then ask why you've changed. They don't make you cry and then call you too emotional. No, love should feel safe. Not perfect, not without disagreements, but safe. You should be able to speak without fearing abandonment. You should be able to express pain without being punished for having feelings. You should be able to trust that the person beside you isn't secretly playing games with your heart. And if you never had that, maybe losing them isn't the tragedy you thought it was. Maybe the tragedy would have been staying long enough to completely lose yourself. That's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes the person you are crying over is not the person you lost. Sometimes you're crying over the future you imagined with them, the wedding you imagined, the home you imagined, the family you imagined, the old age you imagined. You're grieving a future that never happened. And that's why letting go can feel so painful. But listen to me. A future that requires you to destroy your peace isn't your future. It's a fantasy you need to release. Your real future is still waiting. There are mornings ahead where you won't wake up anxious. There are nights ahead where you will sleep without checking your phone. There are conversations ahead where someone will listen without making you feel like a burden. There's a love ahead that won't require you to constantly prove that you're worth keeping. But before that love arrives, you have to stop returning to the place where you learn to accept less. That's your assignment now, not revenge, not jealousy, not making them suffer. Your assignment is becoming so emotionally strong that their behavior no longer determines your identity. If they regret losing you, let them. If they miss you, let them. If they realize they made the biggest mistake of their life, let them realize it. But don't stop your healing just because someone finally noticed your absence. Keep moving, because one day you're going to look back at this chapter and realize something. They didn't destroy you. They introduced you to a strength you didn't know you had. The tears taught you. The silence taught you. The rejection taught you. The disappointment taught you. And the person who thought they were breaking your heart may have unknowingly been pushing you toward the strongest version of yourself. So let them live with their choices, and you live with yours. They chose games. You choose growth. They chose confusion. You choose clarity. They chose temporary attention. You choose lasting peace. They chose to lose you, and now you choose not to lose yourself again. That is where your story begins to change. There comes a day after heartbreak when something inside you becomes quiet, not because you stopped caring overnight, not because the memories disappeared, not because the love suddenly vanished. You become quiet because you finally understand. You understand that you cannot force someone to appreciate what they were determined to take for granted. You understand that some people only recognize your value after they lose access to you. And you understand that your life cannot remain paused, waiting for someone else to decide whether you're worth choosing. That realization hurts, but it also sets you free, because for so long you were waiting for them to give you closure. You wanted an apology. You wanted an explanation. You wanted them to admit that they were wrong. You wanted them to say, I hurt you and I regret it. But sometimes closure doesn't come from their mouth. Sometimes closure comes from your own decision to stop asking questions that their actions already answered. Their behavior told you everything. Their inconsistency told you everything. Their silence told you everything. Their games told you everything. And when somebody repeatedly shows you who they are, believing their promises over their patterns will only keep you trapped. So stop waiting for the apology. Stop waiting for the message. Stop waiting for the day they finally understand. Because your healing cannot depend on their awareness. Your peace cannot depend on their regret. And your future cannot depend on whether they come back. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But either way, you have a life to live. There was a time when you thought losing them meant losing everything. But now you're beginning to see that you didn't lose everything. You lost someone who didn't know how to hold your heart carefully, and that is painful. But it is not the end of your story. Think about the person you were before they entered your life. You had dreams, you had plans, you had confidence, and then you had things that made you smile before their name became connected to your happiness. Then somewhere along the way, their attention became your validation. Their mood became your mood. Their silence became your anxiety. Their approval became your confidence. And slowly, without realizing it, you gave another human being control over how you felt about yourself. Now you're taking that power back. That's what this chapter is really about. Not getting even, getting yourself back. The strongest response to somebody who played games with your heart is not playing a better game, it's refusing to play at all. Let them wonder why you're quiet. Let them wonder why you're not chasing. Let them wonder why you don't react anymore. But don't do it as a strategy. Do it because you're genuinely becoming unavailable for anything that disturbs your peace. There is a difference between pretending not to care and actually healing. Pretending says, I hope they notice that I'm ignoring them. Healing says, whether they notice or not, I'm okay. That's the freedom you're looking for. Because if you're still checking whether they viewed your story, you're still giving them power. If you're posting just to make them jealous, you're still giving them power. If you're constantly asking friends what they're doing, you're still giving them power. But when you stop checking, stop explaining, stop monitoring, stop waiting, something changes. You become free. And freedom looks good on you. You begin sleeping peacefully again. You begin laughing without forcing it. You begin taking care of yourself. You begin making plans that don't include them. And slowly, the person you lost becomes smaller in your mind. Not because they became less important, but because you became bigger. That's the transformation. And maybe one day they will come back. Maybe they'll stand in front of you with regret in their eyes. Maybe they'll finally say the words you waited months to hear. I was wrong. I didn't appreciate you. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I miss you. And you may feel something. Of course you will. You love them. You're not made of stone. But remember who you became while they were gone. Remember the nights you cried. Remember the moments you questioned your worth. Remember how many times you tried to fix something you didn't break. Remember how many times you accepted less because you were afraid of losing them. And then ask yourself one question. If I let this person back into my life, am I returning because they've changed or because I'm lonely? That question matters. Because loneliness can make familiar pain look like love. Don't let loneliness negotiate your standards. You deserve consistency. You deserve honesty. You deserve someone who doesn't make you wonder where you stand. And if someone wants another chance with you, they should understand that they are not returning to the same person they left. You're wiser now. Your heart is softer, but your boundaries are stronger. You can forgive without forgetting the lesson. You can love without losing yourself. You can care without chasing. You can wish them well without inviting them back. And that is real emotional maturity. Maybe they will suffer because they finally realize what they lost. But that's not your victory. Your victory is that their suffering is no longer your concern. Because the moment you stop needing their regret, they lose the last piece of control they had over you. That's when you truly win. You don't need them to cry. You don't need them to beg. You don't need them to come crawling back. You don't need revenge. You need peace. And peace is more powerful than revenge because revenge keeps you connected to the wound. Peace allows you to walk away from it. So if you're sitting somewhere tonight with tears in your eyes, hear this clearly. You are not difficult to love because someone treated you badly. You are not worthless because someone failed to recognize your worth. You are not replaceable because someone replaced you. And you are not broken because your heart is hurting. You're human. You cared. You trusted. You hoped. And those are not weaknesses. Those are signs that your heart was capable of something real. Don't punish yourself for loving sincerely. Instead, learn from where you gave too much to someone who gave too little. Your next relationship should not be built on fear. It should be built on mutual respect. Your next love should not make you constantly wonder if you're enough. It should remind you that you never had to prove it. And until that person arrives, don't rush. Build yourself. Build your confidence. Build your dreams. Build your peace. Become so deeply connected to yourself that being alone no longer feels like abandonment. Because when you reach that place, you stop choosing people because you're afraid of being alone. You choose them because they genuinely add something beautiful to a life you already love. That's the difference between needing someone and choosing someone. And perhaps the person who played games with you will eventually understand that they didn't just lose a relationship. They lost someone who genuinely cared, someone who believed in them, someone who stayed, someone who gave chances, someone who loved them when they weren't easy to love. And one day, when they meet someone else, they may realize that not everybody will give them what you gave them. Not everyone will understand them. Not everyone will tolerate their games. Not everyone will stay through the difficult seasons. And that's when regret may arrive, quietly, late at night, when memories come back, when they remember your voice, your kindness, your patience. the way you looked at them when you still believed in them. But if that day comes, don't celebrate their pain. Celebrate your freedom. Because you don't need someone to suffer for you to heal. You don't need them to regret you for your life to move forward. You don't need them to come back for your story to have a happy ending. Sometimes the happy ending is simply this: you survived, you learned, you grew, and you finally stopped abandoning yourself for people who were never afraid to abandon you. So let them live with their choices. Let them remember you. Let them wonder. Let them regret. But you keep walking. Your heart may still be tender. Your eyes may still get wet sometimes, but you're moving forward. And eventually you'll realize that the person you were begging not to lose was never more important than the person you were becoming. And that person is you. If you remember nothing else from this message, remember this: the greatest revenge against someone who played with your heart is not making them hurt. It is becoming so whole that their absence no longer has the power to hurt you. Maybe they thought you would always be there. Maybe they thought you would keep answering. Maybe they thought you would forgive every lie, every disappearing act, every broken promise. Maybe they believed your love made you weak, but they were wrong. Your love was never your weakness. Your lack of boundaries was the only thing that allowed them to misuse it, and now you know better. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to make them jealous. You don't have to prove that you're doing better. Just live. Live so fully that the chapter they tried to destroy becomes the chapter that taught you how powerful you really are. Because one day you're going to wake up and realize you haven't thought about them all morning. Then one day you'll go an entire day without checking their profile. Then a week, then a month. And suddenly the person you thought you could never live without becomes a memory. Not a wound, a memory. And that's when you know you've healed. If they come back, let their actions speak. If they apologize, listen if you want to. If they regret it, that's their journey. But never confuse their regret with your responsibility. You don't have to return just because someone finally understands your value. Sometimes people appreciate the door only after they no longer have the key, and that's okay. Let them understand, let them learn, let them remember. But don't stop your life waiting for their realization. You have too much life left to live. There are mornings you haven't seen yet. There are dreams you haven't accomplished yet. There are people you haven't met yet. There are places you haven't visited yet. There are versions of yourself you haven't become yet. Don't sacrifice all of that because one person failed to appreciate you. You were not put on this earth to spend your life convincing somebody to love you correctly. You deserve love that feels peaceful, love that doesn't leave you crying alone at night, love that doesn't make you question your worth, love that doesn't disappear whenever things become difficult. And until that love finds you, learn to give yourself the love you are begging someone else to give you. Take yourself out. Take care of yourself. Build your dreams. Protect your peace. Laugh again. Dream again. Trust yourself again. And when you finally look back at the person who hurt you, don't ask, why wasn't I enough? Ask, why did I ever believe I wasn't? Because you were enough. You were always enough. Their inability to value you was never proof that you lacked value. It was proof that they lacked the capacity to recognize it. So don't become bitter. Become wiser. Don't become cold. Become stronger. Don't stop loving. Just become more selective about who receives your love. And if they suffer because they lost you, let that be the consequence of their choices. But don't make their suffering your mission. Your mission is bigger. Your mission is to heal. Your mission is to rise. Your mission is to become the person you were meant to be before heartbreak convinced you that you were broken. One day somebody will meet you after you've healed. They won't have to convince you to trust them. They won't have to repair wounds they didn't create. And they'll simply meet the stronger version of you that emerged from the ashes. And you'll finally understand why the wrong person had to leave. Not because losing them was easy, but because staying would have cost you more. So tonight, wipe your tears. Take a deep breath and tell yourself something you should have told yourself a long time ago. I release what I cannot control. I forgive myself for staying too long. I forgive myself for believing their promises. I forgive myself for loving someone who didn't know how to love me. And from this day forward, I choose me. That's your power, not making them beg, not making them suffer, not making them regret, choosing yourself. Because when you choose yourself after someone has spent so long making, you feel unworthy. You don't just walk away from a relationship. You walk away from the version of yourself that believed you had to accept pain to receive love. And that is freedom. Let them remember you. Let them wonder about you. Let them regret you. But don't look back. Your best days are not behind you. Your best days are waiting for you. And the person you are becoming will one day thank the person you are today for having the courage to walk away. You didn't lose them. You found yourself. And believe me, that's the victory they can never take away from you.